Okay, wonderful. I'm just going to kick us off right at the 10 after the hour. Thank you for joining us. We know that this has been a really packed day for those of you that participated in the previous panels. So much good content. We hope that this session really takes us from looking at the postdoc experience to looking beyond into the career, moving on into JIS. As mentioned, this is the fourth panel at the National Postdoc Association Race and Ethnicity Equity Summit. And we are just so pleased to have all of you here today. I'm Jessica Wise with the Higher Education Recruitment Consortium. And I'm going to go over a few logistics before we jump in. As you saw that this session is being recorded, we do have the attendees on mute, but we will be watching the chat. So please use that throughout the session so we can advise our speakers or answer questions as they come up, as well as at the end. We have the links to the speaker bios on the NPA website. And finally, the recorded session will be available on the NPA website, along with all the wonderful resources that you all know well from the NPA resource library. Our agenda today is that we're going to go through quick introductions. We really want to get to the meat of the presentation. We have our panelist who will speak for around 20 minutes. Then we have a couple prepared questions, and then we'll open it up at the end for Q&A. Again, if you have questions throughout the sessions, please feel free to send those to us. We do want to make sure that we are active and engaging what questions you might have. You saw the description, but to really remind us what we're here to talk about in this fourth panel, we want to look at those completion stages. So we know that there's a lot of pent up postdoc folks that are ready to make that next step into their careers. And we want to continue that conversation to make sure that folks from all backgrounds have the same opportunities. And it's lovely to see folks continuing to enter. So thanks for joining us, for those of you that are just coming in. So we're going to jump right in and introduce our amazing panel that we have here today. We have Julia Omotade, Andrea Pereira, Omanjana Goswami, and Shakira Nelson, who are going to speak to you for each from their perspective, and then again answer some questions towards the end. I'm going to, before we go forward, and Amy, I forgot to double check if we had this or not. So we're going to maybe use the chat to do this. We would love to know what describes your current role. Please in the chat, let us know if you are a graduate student, postdoc, faculty member, staff administrator, nonprofit or association staff, or other. We'll get a sense of who's in the room with us. We'll take a moment to do that. Okay. Great. Thanks for those of you that are doing that. It looks like we have a pretty good mix of postdocs and a few administrators, a couple PIs. That's wonderful. Thank you for doing that. And then we have one more for you real quick. And for those of you that are postdocs or graduate students, we'd like to know where you are in your search process. Are you actively looking for new positions? Are you open to new opportunities? You're not really looking, or very exciting if you've just received an offer. Please let us know that as well. Great. Recently received, Eileen, congratulations. Hopefully you'll get some advice today that will help as you're making that next step. And some of you are getting ready, just looking, maybe not looking quite yet. And then some looking as of this summer. So perfect timing. And I think all of you will get some great information. Thanks for doing that. We really appreciate it. It helps us ground with who's in the room with us. So I'm going to jump right in and hand it over to Julia to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So it's so great to be here with everyone. Thank you to NPA for having me, and thank you all for listening. So my name is Julia Omotade. I am a cellular molecular neuroscientist by training. But what you'll hear me say often is that, you're not just a scientist when you're holding a pipette. So I transitioned after my PhD to academic medicine consulting. What does that mean? I actually had no clue that it existed before I completed my PhD. What academic medicine or search consulting is all of those leadership positions and all of those roles within academic medicine. We're not so much talking about the workforce here. We're not talking about postdocs or faculty members. We're talking about more institutional or administrative leaders, institute directors, chairs, deans, provosts. We were the folks to consult with the leadership and to recruit those positions. And that really, as a scientist, it changed my mind. It really changed my mind. I thought science was kind of more what you're doing at the bench. And this taught me that there was a leadership and a strategy to not only science, but to the people in science. And so that's what I hope to share with you all today. how to optimize your executive presence. As you make a really strong point here that I'm not just talking about those who are going to faculty positions. That's wonderful if you are, but also if you're going to careers beyond the benchtop, this is hopefully applicable to you as well. I currently work at the Association of American Medical Colleges doing science policy work. So transitioning from your postdoc, optimizing your portfolio and executive presence. So I thought, what can I share with you all? Kind of in the 4 minutes that I have, what are the most important things that I would love people to know who aren't on search committees every day, who aren't talking to candidates every day like I had, who aren't seeing kind of a host of positions. And what I can say is that these are the most conserved things and also the things that people tend not to realize. So I'll try and go through them quickly. And if you have any questions on them, I would love to hear that in the discussion afterwards. So the first thing is, if you have needs for compensation, directly say what they are. It's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel as if maybe you're pushy. There's copious amounts of data that shows that women or people from groups that are historically excluded in a field, they may have a harder time at asking for the appropriate compensation. You should broach that with the recruiter, with the search team, with the staff that you're working with. They should be able to handle that, and they're there to help. The second and third points are connected. If you're getting yellow flags, talk to the search consultant or the committee about it, and state how you're experiencing the process. So this is a really important one, and one that I've seen go well so many times. Folks will say, you know, Julia, here's a yellow flag I'm experiencing, or I noticed the search committee is all MDs and no PhDs. Are they looking for more clinical research? I'm doing basic research. Is that going to be dinged? I noticed X, I noticed Y, I noticed C. Those are really good to broach with the consultant or the committee or whoever you're talking to at the institution or organization that you're looking for. They can give you insight. They should be able to handle those questions. And not only that, the more that they hear from candidates such as yourself, the more they can maybe alter the search or the process to kind of reflect the anxieties or fears or misunderstandings that they're hearing. If you don't want the job, keep yourself out of the search. Right? But if you are even a little bit interested in the job, if it's feasible, be open to a conversation. What I always say is you never really know until you figure out more. And so I cannot tell you the amount of roles that people have been placed in because they've just been open to a conversation. 99%, no exaggeration, 99% of the roles that I have placed for people, they were not looking and they were satisfied and happy in their jobs. Typically, people that are looking are not the ones that are going to be placed at perhaps the leadership level or the chair level. They're satisfied in their role. They already have a good postdoc. They're already a faculty member somewhere. They have resources, but they're open to learning more. Sure, I'll entertain it and learn more about the process. And so if you have even just an inkling that you want to learn more, I would say engage with the recruiter. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm happy, I'm not looking, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you. This one is more, I would say, for folks as they progress throughout their careers, and that is ask about confidentiality. These are particularly in the searches where you don't want your profile to be out there. Typically, if you're going from a postdoc to a faculty position, there's going to be some type of talk or seminar that's typically broadcasted within the department. We all know this pretty well. At that point, there's usually, very minimal, if any, confidentiality. But be sure to ask in whatever role that you are, kind of on the hunt for, what are the parameters around confidentiality? And if that's important to you, make sure that you get those answers before you start the search. And this last point is really the one that hits the closest to my heart. And it's really going to segue into our next slide. And that's, do not be afraid. Despite all of the, anxieties, all of the awkwardness, all of the, things that you have to hold kind of in your soul and in your heart, do not be afraid to talk about those issues regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so if we go to our next slide, I want to tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that. Okay, so we can stop here for now. So if you just look at the title, how do these comments harm the? So I've listed kind of 4 categories here. There's the candidate, When you're going through the job search, you interface with, the institution as a candidate, as someone who's looking for the job. There's also the search in and of itself, the actual search process. There's the beginning of the search, the middle of the search, the narrowing of candidates, the end of the search, and selecting a hire. The search itself has a process. There's the committee. Oftentimes with faculty committees, this is made up of students, postdocs, leaders from around the institution. And then the institution itself. Let's say you have a search at Emory or the Broad Institute or UCSF. So these are the kind of 4 components that are going on at any given moment when you're a postdoc looking to go into a faculty position or any other position, maybe a policy position or a consultant position like I did. If we could advance this, we'll see that there's actually lots of harmful comments that I have heard in the room from committees, from institutions, from members of the search themselves. And here are just a few of them. And I want to be very kind of blatant with saying that these comments are not few and far between. They're very, very common. So here's one. That's not where the best people train. We hear that a lot. If someone is at an HBCU, if someone is at an institution that's not in the top 20 for Blue Ridge School of Medicine rankings, if someone that's not at an Ivy or a geographical location that's known for, let's say, neuroscience, you will get these comments from the committee member. Well, we're at a short list and we need a diversity candidate. Okay, she's very talented for a woman candidate. We do want a diverse candidate, but we also want the best and the brightest, as if there's a dilemma between the two or an exclusion between the two. We need an excellent candidate, but a diverse candidate. So why did I put these quotes on the screen? Not to bash the humans that are involved in the search process, but to really empower you and to validate you. The first is I'm going to validate you that if you feel like I have an identity that, could come up in this search, I feel that people might be talking about the fact that I'm a woman candidate, that I am African-American, that I went to an institution that, is a small liberal arts. Know that you're right. My purpose here is to not gaslight you and say people aren't thinking about that. On the contrary, I'm going to be honest, they are. They're talking about it. They're looking at all the things that makes you different from kind of the quote unquote mold. So I want to affirm that, you're not crazy for thinking, is this something that I have to, think about or have to broach with the committee? The second is I want to empower you to bring these comments up with the search committee, bring them up with the recruiter, be proactive. If this is something that you've dealt with, for example, she's very talented for a woman candidate, you can say in your cover letter, you can say to the recruiter, you can say in your committee meeting, I've seen many, many experienced candidates do this with medicine and how it has changed your stance on X, Y, or Z. The very last thing I'll say before turning it over is that in the Q&A, I really want to make sure that if you've heard any of these microaggressions or macroaggressions and you have any questions on how you can deal with them, not only as a candidate, but as a search committee member, maybe you're an institutional leader, I would love to hear that. I've given kind of lots of tips. I've sat in lots of, intense conversations about, how to kind of mitigate this within the process. And the very last thing I'll say before turning it over to the next panelist is within academic medicine, and I hear this a lot within academic medicine, it could be prevalent in other sectors, but certainly within search, a phrase that is really prevalent is diversity candidate. I'm a diversity candidate. When I was in graduate school getting my PhD, I was a, diversity student. I then became a diversity candidate. When people are in searches, and you're Black or you're a woman or you're part of the LGBTQ community, you become a diversity candidate. And what I want to do here is not put shame or blame on anyone, but I want to just allow us to open our minds a little bit to alternative ways to say this. First of all, when you say diversity candidate, oftentimes it can feel like you're discrediting the merit and the accomplishments of the hire and only whittling it down to an identifier. They're Black, they're a woman, right? So, X is a diversity candidate. No, they're not a diversity candidate. They're the first chair of neurosurgery in the US. That's what they are. The second thing is, one person cannot be diverse. You're not a diversity candidate. You yourself might belong to a group of people that have been underrepresented. You might have a diverse set of experiences, but one person cannot be diverse. And the very last thing that I will say about that is there's no shame in being specific. I don't even know what a diversity candidate is, and I was in the search world for 4 years. Do you mean women? Do you mean first-generation college students? Do you mean those who are from Asian descent? What do you mean when you say diversity candidate? It's extremely non-specific, and for that reason, it's very not effective. And this is something I refer to myself as. I've only made the transition as of a year and a half ago. So I would love to hear again in the Q&A your comments and your thoughts about diversity candidate. But I'll just push everyone to be open to alternative phrases. There are lots of other ways to talk about inclusive excellence without perhaps labeling someone as a diversity candidate. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next panelist. Thanks so much, Jessica.
Okay, that would be me. Thank you, Julia.
I was on mute. Thank you, Julia. That was wonderful, and I think a lot of thoughts are going for the section on Q&A. And Andrea, handing it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica, so far, and I'm really happy to be part of this. So I'm Andrea Pereira. I am a postdoc at East Carolina University, and I do research in muscle metabolism. I'm also part of the NPA Board of Directors, and I'm originally from our graduate school there. And then I came to the US to do my postdoc. So being a foreigner, a non-US degree holder, a Spanish-speaking Latina woman, made me very aware and curious about how the international dimension of my identity shapes my professional choices and also shapes the opportunities I am kind of allowed to pursue. And that how, that plays a role into me trying to move on with my career. So first, I think it's important to get a quick snapshot at the current inequalities in academia when it comes to international representation. And I say academia because in a way, most of us postdocs at this stage in our careers are in academia or a national laboratory that maybe has a similar structure or maybe a private institute, but we have a lot of commonalities between those worlds. And it's not surprisingly, that it's not surprising that there are a lot of inequalities when it comes to international representation, and especially in the current climate of academic exodus. I think it's important that we kind of take a look at how the stats are in our favor or against us. So we can go to the next slide that has a like a good scientist, I had to put a figure from a paper up there. I couldn't resist. So if I were a prospective international scholar today and saw the numbers that 60% of the current postdocs are of international origin, I would say, wow, like the US academic system is a path of low resistance for us to come here and try to train and be professionals and do our work and contribute to scientific discoveries. And then you flip the page and you see what happens on the other side. Once you transition into a permanent position on become a faculty somewhere. And this is from a recent publication. I'm sorry if it's kind of small. It's a really good reading if you are if you're bored on Saturday and Sunday and you want to take a look at that. And this publication showcases, over 350 institutions in the US for over 10 years, and they just checked where the faculty are coming from. And it's very, very striking to see that of that 60% original, only 10% of those faculties currently in the US have degrees from abroad. And actually the majority of those are either from Canada or the UK combined. So clearly, the representation of the international scholars after their postdocs is quite different to at our current stage. And so I wonder, what's happening here. So suddenly, all those postdocs just lost interest in academic research, or perhaps they're particularly vulnerable to the challenges of moving on because of their international identities, either in academia or outside of it. And then we can maybe go to the next slide and discuss a little bit, just a little bit. So I don't want to take a lot of time from my other colleagues and panelists here. This could take, a full hour to discuss, but I know that having, common experiences doesn't mean that we have shared experiences. And because I am international, it doesn't mean that what happened to me or what happens to me reflects on everyone else and that everyone else is having the same experiences. But when you talk to peers that have similar trajectories they came to the US, usually with their degrees from abroad, they're facing very similar challenges. And although there are probably way more than this four, I think these are at the main core of our struggles. So just a quick snapshot of these. I think that a recurrent advice that I hear in academia over and over is that you need to start planning your career early, and that the clock starts ticking the moment you get your PhD degree, because of this early career stage that you need to fulfill, But I feel like we need to redefine what this advice and the implications of this advice look like when you are an international scholar, because you're pretty much resetting your career the moment you come here. And maybe many of you feel that you're doing both a PhD and a postdoc combined and trying to catch up in terms of knowledge, skills, publications, fundings, because maybe you come from a very different academic or scientific system in your own cultures that has a different set of rules. So when you come here, it's kind of resetting that clock. So what does it mean what does early look like for someone like me? So I encourage both, candidates trying to move on and institutions helping those candidates move on to really think about the implications of this and how can you actually help someone in this situation in particular. And then another recurrent issue is how oblivious sometimes we are, international postdocs, to the nitty-gritty of the academic system in the US. I've discovered that you really need to know how to play the game. If you're new to the system, you feel lost sometimes. So if you're an international postdoc, just surround yourself with allies that know how to play this game and that are willing to do some hand-holding while you get started. And if you're an academic administrator or the representative of an institution, a PDO, please consider developing training, like not only, for example, on grant writing skills, but on actually how the American funding landscape looks like and how it functions, because we really don't know. And we are trying again to catch up with a lot. So sometimes you know how to write a grant, but you don't know where to apply, how to apply, where to look for those opportunities. And fortunately, I want to say here that there are a lot of programs that are now, designed by postdocs and run by postdocs and early career faculties across the US that are helping candidates from underrepresented minorities to learn how to play the game if they want to stay in academia. And what I would personally like to see is that for those programs that, diversity would also include postdocs that are in non-famous institutions, non-R1 institutions. So we can also define diversity in those terms as well. And last but not least, the visa and the accent issue. If you are on a visa or have been on a visa, you know the impact that has on your personal and professional life. I have to explain to my coworkers why I need to visit the DMV every year to renew my driver's license, for example, or why I cannot apply to that job that looks like a great fit because of citizenship issues. So, if you're an international scholar, you know that sometimes you scroll through the job ad and you look for that line, am I eligible to apply? Or a fellowship, am I eligible to apply? And that puts a big burden on international scholars. And then just to close, this is, I feel like, a very common topic. We all discuss it in different meetings that we have. It's impossible, not to think that your accent is creating a barrier somehow to your professional success. And I think we all try to improve that. We all try to hide the fact that maybe we speak English with an accent. And when you go to the professionals and you consult them, they say, well, you're focusing on the wrong thing. What you want to improve is your communication skills. Your accent is the least important of all of those. It's important for you to maybe expand your vocabulary or maybe know how to, attract your audience and how to engage your audience, how to effectively communicate your message, how to be more effective and succinct. And the accent is just, people don't pay attention to that. You think that they pay attention because that's usually how the conversation starts in the elevator, right? Like I say hello and people's like, oh, you have an accent. Where are you from? It's inevitable. But then at the end of the day is, how can I, engage with them, and how can I connect with them, and how I can show emotions through my speak and not just how it sounds to others. So if you're a scholar, think about this. And if you are an administrator, next time you maybe develop a workshop on communication skills for non-English speakers, just don't focus on the accent, or make sure that you highlight that this is not the most important thing for effective communication. And I'll stop here, and I hope this sparks some discussion later, and I'm happy to dig deeper in any of these topics. And now I'll pass it to the next speaker today.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. There you go. Yep.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Omanjana. I'm an interdisciplinary scientist at the Food and Environment Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is a national nonprofit which works at the intersection of food and agriculture policy issues, using science to drive our nation's food and policy agenda forward. I know I said a lot of food and policy words, and I'll just allude to, how I ended up in this career. And I think it's very, very timely that I am speaking after Andrea, because I was an international PhD student here, and I transitioned to a non-academic position without going through the postdoc route. So I know a lot of people here are coming from that postdoc route and are looking for positions in and outside academia. So maybe my experience can help sort of, guide you in your decisions as you start thinking about moving on. Can we move forward in the slide deck, please? Yes. So I went to graduate school in New Jersey and spent a year as a science policy fellow on Capitol Hill, which in itself is a little bit unique because people don't usually take a year off of grad school and run away to a different city and come back to finish their PhD, let alone being an international student in that space. But I would say I was very lucky because I was able to find a very supportive advisor who let me do that, who herself was an international student back in the day. And B, I was able to find a visa loophole, which would allow me to work without losing my post-graduation work status. And I worked for Congresswoman from Hawaii on issues of environmental conservation, pollution, ocean and marine affairs, and then just unlearning how to be an academic in a policy space, which was a very interesting career, and I absolutely loved it. And I realized that upon graduation, I'm going to throw away my academic dreams and transition to a career of working in science policy, while at the same time being a scientist in the space, which can often be challenging. I'm not American, so a lot of doors don't open for me. There are citizenship barriers which I've navigated, especially transitioning out of academic sort of space. And I'll just allude to a few ways in which, people like us who want to pursue these, what I like to call these atypical careers, after a graduate degree or postdoc, what are the ways that we can end up in positions like this? And there are policy fellowships both for natural, environmental, social scientists, as well as more technical disciplines. And these policy fellowships allow us to kind of dip our toes in the sector, more like an internship, without really committing to a whole career in that field. And I really feel that for advanced graduate students, this is a great sort of exposure opportunity where if you're not really sure if you want to stay on in academia, or you're not finding that right postdoc experience that you would like to be on your CV, I would totally recommend pursuing a short-term policy fellowship or working for like, a think tank, a nonprofit, or even a career in the government. Government has fellowships too, internships too, by the way, where you're able to test out a career without committing to it. And I think that is often not talked about in graduate school. So for all of the administrators out there who are in this panel, I would highly recommend, when we're thinking about careers after graduate education or for advanced postdocs, we think about ways in which, there are challenges in academia, and we've accepted that. And we know that there are far more applicants for positions than there are positions. So obviously there's intense cutthroat competition. And there are people like me who've not had exposure to careers outside of the academic discipline. I came here in 2016 not knowing anything else aside from the fact that I'll finish my graduate degree, I'll do a postdoc or two, and then become a professor somewhere. But somewhere along the journey, I ended up in a panel at a conference where I went for the free food, full disclosure, and heard science policy fellows talk about it. And that literally changed my career. So if you're ever at a conference and you're going for the free food, keep an ear open. It might change your life. But often graduate school and even postdoc positions don't really prepare us in a sense to think of us, marketing ourselves, marketing our skills. We are great researchers, we're great bench scientists, but we often don't think about that if we leave academia, what is it that we can bring to the table? Can we move to the next slide? And I think the 5 key skills, I have like one hand, 5 key skills that I always tell people that, we as postdocs, as graduate students, we are bringing to the table is our research ability and the ability to manage projects all by ourselves without much oversight. And some of that can often involve, reading intense, papers and digesting all of that information and summarizing that within a few hours of the time. That's a big part of my current job. I have to read like 10 papers and write a paragraph on it in like 2 hours sometimes. And I mean, 5 years ago, it would have been impossible for me, but it's something that our training teaches us. The second most important thing is collaboration. I mean, as academics, as researchers, we're inherently taught to collaborate in and outside of our lab, outside of our research space. So we kind of bring these 2 sort of complementary skills to the table right away. And then, of course, there are other pieces like time management and project management skills, which we are kind of taught to do. And it's more like a self skill. You know how to manage your project, you know how to manage your time. You have to these skill sets that you can bring will eventually they shape you in the way that you're letting them shape you. I'm sorry, I lost my words for a moment, but I'd like to sort of take a step back and talk about the opportunities and challenges that come with moving on to these positions, which are not so common. And the first and the foremost is, I think, representation, which the biggest challenge for that is networking and mentorship. I had literally nobody who followed a similar career trajectory when I was looking to switch. And I navigated this space without having the sense of community, which is, I feel, very, very important, who can prepare you for certain challenges, who can be your sounding board for your bad days or for, often advice of how to navigate this space. And as an international graduate student, I did that by myself. I had peers who'd gotten graduate degrees here, who are American citizens, who don't really have the same set of challenges that we do. And that of course, the bigger part of that is, lack of mentorship and networking. I still networked my way into certain things, but it was very, very difficult. Out of 10 doors that opened for somebody else, only a single door opened for me. And if I had that community and that support behind me, I think I would have done a better job of navigating the space than what I did. And of course, lack of representation also brings kind of the questions that come with, is this a feasible career option for me? I don't see anyone who I can relate to in this space. Does that mean this space is not for me? And that is a question I've asked myself every single day since I've transitioned outside after grad school. And I truly think that without taking the step, there'll be no one to create that community for us. So it's important that we follow our hearts. I really, really love working in science policy, but I don't know if 10 years down the line, I can keep doing the same given the significant amount of visa challenges that I have, which of course brings to the other question of like lack of representation and the fact that people eventually move out of positions like mine and fall back onto their safety net, which is academia, which is the university community, because there's long-term visa support in that. There's doors that open for us there that don't open necessarily here. But without representation here, without sort of amplifying these challenges in the space, these issues will still remain without being solved. And I think if you are looking for positions outside of academia to seek positions in the industry, in the nonprofit sector, as well as nonprofit adjacent sector like think tanks and governments, please feel free to reach out to me. I know that these come with challenges, especially citizenship challenges, which is kind of that first door that we hit. But I'm seeing, at least working in the space, I'm seeing it open up. And I would truly encourage everyone to sort of think beyond what they're looking for as they think of transitioning out.
Thank you so much. And we're going to, just for sake of time, get on to Shakira to make sure we have a few minutes to answer the prepped questions. Shakira, and thank you, Amanda.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'll go as quickly as possible. I am Shakira. I work for the NIH in the National Institute of General Medical Sciences. Specifically, I work in the Training, Workforce Development, and Diversity division. Next slide, please. And because of my work in TWD, we all know that there are various ways to see diversity when it comes to science, when it comes to funding mechanisms, when it comes to opportunities. And for us, we look at diversity as a way to enhance excellence, inspire creativity, and drive innovation. But we also know that there are ways, whether they are overt or covert, that contribute to structural racism overall. Next slide, thank you. And so a lot of what we do within TWD are to find ways to combat a lot of these contributions to structural racism and discrimination. And this is mostly in the form of training opportunities or individual fellowships programs that we put together. Next slide, please. And so I quickly just wanted to kind of give a list of some of the contributions to structural racism and discrimination that we recognize. And I highlighted, or I should say, I bolded a few under each of the categories, which fall under student level contributions, funding level contributions, and faculty level contributions. The bolded contributions that I have here are ones that we discuss a lot within our meetings at NIGMS, and that we want to make sure that we are addressing to the best of our ability across the spectrum. Again, this is not just within the training programs that we put together or the fellowships that are available, but it's within the policies that we have, it's within the opportunities we provide, and it's just within our overall talking points. And so as you can see at the student level, the contributions of microaggressions, isolation, imposter syndrome, or it's now imposter phenomenon, and stereotype threats, as well as burden of representation, are high on our list of contributions at that level. At the funding level, we understand the contributions of the R01 disparities and how negative that is against the ability for underrepresented minorities across the spectrum to achieve funding and have success, whether or not it's at the academic level when it comes to R01, or if it's at other levels, such as peer review and review criteria. And then of course, at the faculty level, we have biases in hiring that we see, as well as what we now know as the minority tax and the negative effects that has to the ability to diversify and to provide and promote an inclusive and safe environment. Next slide, please. And so what I wanted to do quickly, because I'm part of NIH and we are the funding mechanism that many of you are familiar with, and especially because of the audience members we have, both heavy in postdocs and heavy in administrators as well. I wanted to kind of give a brief glimpse into some of the training programs, both at the institutional and the individual level that we have, just to share that with you guys, and of course, open it up to questions later if there's any interest in these programs. So the first one I'll discuss quickly is one of our postdoctoral programs called IRACTA. It stands for Institutional Research and Academic Development Award. This is an institutional level award that pairs research intensive institutions with teaching intensive institutions, typically those that cater more to minority populations. And this program is for postdocs who are interested in moving into teaching, but the heavy emphasis is those who are interested in moving into teaching in lower represented institutions or R2 institutions or PUIs as well. And so this is a program that I am one of the program officers on. I'm happy to speak more about it, but what we love about this program is the success that we have seen so far, as you can see in this graph here at the bottom, where the majority of the alumni of this IRACTA program have gone to academic faculty positions, which is the outcome that we're looking for. And so we find that this program has been successful so far as a feeder program to those who are interested in academia. Next slide, please. And so we also have the typical K99 program, which is the K99R00. Again, for those who are interested in academia, this is a program that will provide mentored research for 2 years at the K level, followed by up to 3 years of independent funding for those who are looking to move into an independent faculty career. Next slide, please. One thing I wanted to highlight about the K99 is in NIGMS specifically, we have a program called Mosaic, which is structured in the K99 program. However, it is a diversity enhancing K99R00 opportunity. So this program is very similar to the K99 parent. However, like I mentioned, this program is focused on progressing and encouraging the diversification of faculty at the academic level. There is no structure in terms of those who are interested in moving into R1 faculty versus more teaching intensive faculty positions, but we are looking for those who want to go into an independent career. I will say that the majority of the participants have gone more into research intensive careers, but we are looking, bottom line, to diversify the faculty that we see and try to work against some of those structural contributions that I mentioned at the beginning. Next slide, please. And so lastly, this program is another institutional program. It's one of our intramural training programs. So this is for postdocs who are interested in doing intramural postdoctoral fellowship work. Again, I'm one of the program officers on this program. It's an individual fellowship program, but it's preparing trainees for leadership positions and biomedical careers. And again, it's an intramural program. So those who are interested in doing biomedical research or biomedical workforce related research within one of the NIH institutes. Next slide, please. And so lastly, I'll just mention an individual fellowship program for postdocs that we have. It's the F32 program. As you can see here, this supports advanced and specialized training in both basic and/or clinical research through an intensive mentor research project experience. There are multiple deadlines for this fellowship. I won't go through everything. I think you guys will have access to the slides. But the reason, again, I wanted to bring up these programs we have is because I wanted to give you a glimpse into how we are working to combat some of the contributions to structural racism. I also think it's important to take away from what Julia and Andrea and Omanjana said about their experiences, both at the international level and both at the internal level of looking at, panels for job applications, job interviews and things like that, and sort of take that into account for other things that we are looking to accomplish through our training programs, and making sure that there's always going to be a professional development and career development aspect across the board that's going to help combat some of the things that my fellow colleagues spoke about in their presentations. And so I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Shakira. This was such a good, I feel like we got really good tools from everything from how to approach the job search to what to do as an international scholar, how to look at jobs outside of academia, and then to know that these programs are out there. This is a great overview of that. But we did probably touch on some sensitive topics. So from NPA, I think it's good advice. They want to remind us that many of our campuses have postdoc offices, and those folks are there to help. So if you're not getting what you need on this session, which I hope you got some of it, to just remember to reach out to those groups as well. We have a couple prepared questions, and we'll get through as many of these as we can. And my first question is to Omajana about how graduate students and postdocs market themselves to the search committee. Do you have anything to add from what we heard today or take away that we can leave folks with? And then we'll go through the group.
I think the most important advice is to highlight your skills and strengths and know that when you're marketing yourself to search committees, the way to stand out is basically by being yourself and highlighting what you bring to the table. Like Julia said, if you have sort of compensation asks, if you have certain non-negotiable asks, make sure that you're advocating for that first up, because otherwise it feels like a waste of time. But where if that is addressed at the end and these are not sort of discussed in the beginning, it leaves a lot to be desired in a sense, and people might get pissed.
We don't want that. Thank you. Our second question goes to Andrea. We want to know how graduate students and postdoc navigate that implicit mandate of pursuing your traditional academic career. And we heard a little bit about that, but I want to know if you have anything to add.
Yes, I'll summarize it in a minute. So I think this is part of, like, it's two sides of the same coin. Like, there's a lot of, I don't know any advisors that will mandate that you have to stay in academia, but there's certainly a lot that will only help you advance your career if you stay in academia, because they will argue that that's what they know. They don't know how to help you if you want to transition into science policy or industry. And you cannot blame them if there are ways of helping even without knowing, but sometimes it's just, well, if you're staying in academia, I'll do as much as I can. And my advice for that is you need to surround yourself with a network of informal, unofficial advisors, mentors, guides that have experience in those areas. And I've done that myself. And I was pleasantly surprised to reach out to people that I've never met in my life, usually through someone or at a conference. So networking is super duper important. And they agreed to, help me have conversations, brainstorm with me, sharing resources, sending job ads, and that has been invaluable. And then if you want to stay, but you don't see how, it gets a little bit trickier, but I would say you have to start early, whatever that looks like for you. And again, you have to surround yourself with people that will be blunt to you, and they will give you straightforward advice, and they will really help you thrive and make the best of your experience in academia.
Great, thank you. And Julia, we have a question for you. We want to know, how do applicants navigate conversations about identity and belonging before and during the interview process? I know you have a lot of good advice here, and we shared a document that you put together. So look for that in the chat for folks that didn't see it earlier.
Yes, and I'll keep it short. Thanks, Jessica. I think the first thing is recognize that you're not crazy. Am I overthinking it? Am I a woman? Is it awkward if I bring up something because of my gender? Is it awkward if I bring up something because of my race? I know that they're an equal opportunity employer. Am I going to make it weird if, know that you're not crazy. Affirm yourself. This is a real concern you have. This is a real fear you have. This is a real aspect of your life that's important, that will be important in all your job positions going forward. And you would like to talk about it. So I would say a lot of the work, 60% of the work, is just becoming comfortable within yourself. I'm not here to make it sound easy. It is difficult. but becoming comfortable in yourself to know that you deserve all of your questions answered. It would be bizarre if you were interviewing for a job and someone told you to not ask what the salary is, or to not ask what city the job was in. That would seem bizarre to you. Likewise, it's bizarre to expect candidates to not ask any questions about their personal identity, belonging, whether the community is safe for them, whether there's beyond performative actual initiatives to promote them in the workplace. Know that that's your right. The second thing I'll say that's more tangible is talk with the search committee about it. Talk with the consultant about it. Talk with the chair about it. During your interviews, find those people where you identify, this is someone that I might want to broach the topic with. And I will say that typically people respond positively. So I know we're running short on time. I'll wrap up, but I'll drop my email just in case anyone has some questions in the future.
And any of the panelists that are willing to do that, please do so. Shakira, our last question goes to you, and it has to do with early career. So what's the best steps people can take in year 1 through 3 to position themselves for success?
Yeah, great question. So number one thing I will say is just remember that you are enough, and where you are is exactly where you're supposed to be. So try not to listen to any of the outside voices that might be trying to sway you into a negative direction. And second, I'll say, really establishing a strong team of supporters around you, whether that's a mentor, a sponsor, or an advocate, which all three of those serve different purposes, but establishing that team early to help you to navigate training or funding opportunities, especially for grad students or postdocs who are early in their career. And then once you move to the early career faculty stage, so finding mentors, advocates, and sponsors who can support you along your path, whether it's tenure or whatever it is you're trying to do. And that can give you the space to learn and to grow and to, again, be made aware of opportunities that are out there. And they aren't trying to pile responsibilities on you. They aren't leaning into the minority tax, and they're offering ways for you to be as successful as possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I think that trifecta is really powerful. And it kind of goes back to so many of the things that we've been hitting on that we need that advice for. I'm going to turn it over to Tom to close out not just our panel, but the full session for today. Tom, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jessica, and to the panelists of session 4 for bringing us to a strong close. I want to thank all of the moderators for their consideration and coordination, not just today, but over the last few months, as this effort actually began back in April of this year. So we've been at it for 6 or 7 months already. Thank you also to our amazing panelists. We've been lucky to have you as dedicated leaders at so many different levels of the postdoctoral ecosystem. They all care about making a difference in these critical issues that we discussed today. In the introduction that I shared to kick off the day, I mentioned the importance of being bold when tackling difficult and deep-rooted issues. One of our panelists, Caitlin Russell, brought up a great interplay with that boldness, which is uncomfortable conversations. And in thinking about how all of us can do our part in both continuing this conversation, but also working to actualize change from small everyday changes we can do on our own in our personal lives and professional lives, to helping enact institutional or push on public policy changes. Those conversations often need to be uncomfortable to signify that change is happening. I'm sure many of us are blown away today from not just the discussions, but some of the singular gems of ideas that you shared openly. I want to thank you for your honesty and your willingness to share those, because I'm sure some of them came at an uncomfortable cost at some point in the past. We at the NPA will continue to follow up with our DEI efforts, working with our partners such as SACNAS, AAMC, Abercams, UCS, and more, our institutional, academic, national lab, industry, and professional society members, but also those organizations that we've yet to meet yet. So if you do have those connections, or you're part of organizations that you think would work in synchronicity with the NPA on this issue, please feel free to connect us. Thank you also in advance for reaching out to us with any ideas you have on how we can make events like this better, what we can do more of, and how we can succeed in helping you actualize some of the activities that we talked about today. Today's summit has been recorded and soon will be posted alongside many other materials that are up on the NPA Resource Center. So for your colleagues who were unable to join us today, please feel free to let them know, and that they'll be able to catch up with you by viewing this video on the site soon. With that, we close our first NPA Race and Ethnicity Equity Summit, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.